Hello everyone, welcome to Emaviation, and today I want to talk about the Sukhoi Superjet. Under the pressure of sanctions that Russia is facing now, the government has placed high hopes in the modification of this aircraft, the Sukhoi Superjet new. But what exactly is behind this name? Could it mean a thoroughly upgraded version, an aircraft with improved safety, enhanced passenger comfort, and the use of modern composite materials? After all, we're living in the 21st century, and such expectations would be reasonable. The Superjet new is actually the same Sukhoi Superjet, but with imported parts replaced by domestically produced ones. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, the plant is moving full speed ahead on this version, with the ultimate goal of replacing all the imported components. It is also officially claimed that production of aviation electronics has been established in the country. But what does that actually mean? First and foremost, that the aircraft is now assembled using parts manufactured in Russia. My name is Edgar and I'm glad to welcome you on my channel. I earned my first qualification of aviation technician at the Aviation Training Center at Zvartnots International Airport in Yerevan. I speak 4 languages, I lived in China for 5 years, and now I'm studying film directing at Kino de Pros. I have many interests, I'm passionate about everything aviation, traveling, and my YouTube channel and the community around it. In the future, I'm planning to obtain a pilot's license and maybe even starting an airline. So, let's move on to the main subject of this video. Perhaps the most controversial aircraft of our time, the regional short-haul airliner, the Sukhoi Superjet.
The Sukhoi Superjet is a Russian narrow-body, medium-range regional passenger aircraft designed to carry between 87 and 108 passengers over distances of 3,050 or 4,600 kilometers. It was developed by Sukhoi Civil Aircraft Company, named after Demyanchuk, which, since February 17, 2020, has been a branch of PJSC Irkut Corporation. Built with the involvement of several foreign companies, it became the first large-scale passenger aircraft developed in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The chief designer was Yuri Ivashechkin. The certified type designation of the aircraft is RRJ-95, which means Russian Regional Jet 95, with the ICAO code SU-95. Incidentally, Irkut Corporation also produces another airliner, the MC-21. The Superjet made its maiden flight on May 19, 2008. By the most conservative estimates, just the development alone required about 100 billion rubles, which at 2001 exchange rates equaled roughly 3.3 billion USD. Over nearly 2 decades of design and refinement, much has changed. The SSJ-100, one could say, effectively put the entire Russian aviation industry on a starvation diet. It drained resources from many other aviation projects by absorbing enormous amounts of funding. The aircraft only entered commercial service in 2011. I won't go into detail about how many problems have been associated with this airplane. It's been discussed many times before. Lack of spare parts, poorly organized after-sales service, and substandard quality. Let's first understand how all of this came to be. In 2008, a new aircraft appeared that was expected to become a cornerstone. The design itself was fairly ordinary. However, in its market segment, there was huge demand for such planes. Airbus and Boeing were producing 30 to 40 of aircraft with similar design per month. The market was and is very large. But the competition was also strong, and by the time production launched, many more competitors had appeared, including giants like Mitsubishi. Not to mention that Embraer and Bombardier were already firmly established in the regional jet sector. The decision to create a new short-haul regional aircraft was made in 2000. That year, within the Sukhoi company, then headed by Mikhail Pogosyan, the closed joint stock company Sukhoi Civil Aircraft SCAC was formed. In 2005, a SCAC branch was set up in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, where assembly still takes place today. The Superjet's first flight occurred in May 2008, but the aircraft still has not managed to firmly establish itself in the market. At the same time, when asked how much the program had actually cost the national budget, SCAC management never gave a precise answer. Production financing was carried out under the government's Aviation Industry Development Program, under which UAC, United Aircraft Corporation, received about 90 billion rubles from the state treasury. Most of that money went into organizing production of the new aircraft. In addition, throughout the project, SCAC borrowed extra money from the state-owned Bank under government guarantees, and later debts were restructured. But the main point is this: these expenditures, it seems, will likely never be recouped. The Superjet, in effect, drained resources from the entire aviation sector. Let me remind you that after SCAC was established in 2001, the Russian government launched a federal civil aviation development program, which promised state support for whichever project won the tender, so in this case, the RRJ. But why did the Superjet rise so quickly, especially considering there wasn't even a preliminary design at the time? Who was behind the push to force it through the competition? Back then, Mikhail Pogosyan was only Sukhoi's general designer, as he had never been involved in civil aviation before, but he declared that he could secure additional off-budget financing for the Superjet program, and that claim likely influenced the Commission's decision. Connections at the highest levels of power also played a role. Even Russia's honored aviation designer Alexei Ignatov admitted that the product called Superjet entered development largely thanks to Pogosyan's lobbying resources, but in reality, between 2001 and 2008, much more than those official 100 billion rubles was spent. This point will be very important later, especially considering that Sukhoi already had the resources like people, facilities, equipment. The only thing needed was the aircraft design itself. Mikhail Pogosyan's own path took him from aircraft designer to CEO and back again. Many in the aviation market are convinced that it was not just the Superjet's lack of commercial success, but also political short-sightedness that led to his dismissal from the presidency of UAC. For Pogosyan, the central mission of the past 15 years was the launch of the Sukhoi Superjet 100 regional aircraft. The jet entered serial production, it was sold. His mission was technically completed. But was it done well? And did Pogosyan step down voluntarily, or was he told to leave? There are no clear answers. On one hand, the Superjet was, without doubt, a technological breakthrough for Russian civil aircraft design, and on the other hand, the project has not been economically viable. Its debts exceed $2 billion, and the planned production target of 60 aircraft per year was never reached. In the current climate, success seemed unlikely. Criticism of the United Aircraft Corporation, UAC, was coming from the highest levels of government. Deputy Prime Minister Arkady Dvorkovich openly voiced concerns about the quality of the Sukhoi Superjet. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu weighed in. The Speaker of the Federation Council, Valentina Matvienko, demanded to know where the hundreds of billions of rubles poured into UAC had gone. A prosecutor's report reinforced the criticism, noting that despite unprecedented state support of 75 billion rubles, UAC's debt was still growing while its charter capital kept shrinking. Through it all, Pogosyan held firm to his strategy. He doubled down on the Superjet, denying funding and support to other potentially promising projects. He dismissed Russian-made components, produced mostly by companies under the powerful Rostec Corporation, as unfit for use, preferring instead to work with foreign partners. This ran counter to official state policy. The Ministry of Industry and Trade, which was financing numerous programs through Rostec, made it clear that it wanted a return on its investment. That was impossible, officials argued, if even domestic aircraft weren't buying these parts. In the end, that position prevailed. Pogosyan's successor was named Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade Yuri Slyusar. Pogosyan himself would remain in the corporation, moving into the role of chief designer. A brief aside, I personally believe that procurement should always favor quality. In that sense, I kind of support Pogosyan. If you cannot produce something competitive for civil aviation, then, frankly, stay out of it. Focus on making parts for Lada instead.
Electric windows, remote-controlled central locking, air conditioning, electronic rear vision mirrors. All of these sophisticated features are missing from new Lada Samara. With Lada, you pay for nothing but car. Priced up to an exorbitant $17,495.
and even there, success is far from guaranteed. From fighters to airliners, Pogosyan has always been a difficult figure. Colleagues describe him as a tough, uncompromising man who rarely listens to others and explodes at the slightest criticism, especially when it comes to his beloved Superjet. But his talent is undeniable, and his grasp of the aviation industry unmatched. Much of Pogosyan's career is tied to Sukhoi's design bureau. He joined in 1979 and quickly rose through the ranks. As a young, ambitious engineer, he found himself working under the legendary designer Mikhail Simonov. Under Simonov's guidance, Pogosyan contributed to the development of the Su-27 fighter and its world-famous derivative, the super-maneuverable Su-30. He also worked on the carrier-based Su-33 and the experimental forward-swept-wing Su-47 Berkut. By 1992, Pogosyan had become Simonov's first deputy and just 3 years later, chairman of the board. Compared with Russia's stagnant civilian aircraft sector, the military side of the industry, Sukhoi, Mikoyan, Irkut, was relatively stable. Among them, Sukhoi thrived in no small part thanks to Pogosyan's leadership. His reputation grew. He was awarded the Russian government prize, later receiving the Order of Honor for his contributions to the Su-33. That aircraft, essentially a Su-27 with folding wings, was designed specifically for use on Russia's aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov. As the new millennium approached, Pogosyan's voice carried more and more weight in strategic debates about Russia's aviation future. One pressing issue loomed large: the country's aging civil fleet. In 2000, Pogosyan launched the Russian regional jet project with great fanfare. To strengthen the program, he enlisted Boeing as a consultant, brought in French engine maker Snecma and Italy's Alenia Aeronautica as partners. Aeroflot quickly signed on as the launch customer, committing to 30 aircraft, later increasing its order to 45. Thanks to Pogosyan's energy, the RRJ was hailed as the great hope of Russian civil aviation. That was the official story. But behind the headlines, questions lingered. Who exactly designed the aircraft? Sukhoi's bureau had zero experience in commercial aviation. Even as a schoolboy in the 6th grade, I wondered why Sukhoi, known for fighters, was tasked with a passenger jet. Looking back now, I suspect that either Sukhoi's bureau had little to do with the actual design, or if it did, the result reflected inexperience. In the Soviet Union, only few bureaus specialized in civil aircraft like Ilyushin, Tupolev, and Yakovlev. They had decades of background, 30, 40 years of accumulated expertise. Suddenly, Sukhoi, with no civil experience, was entering the field, a strange choice to say the least. Russia effectively created just the airframe, while key systems were developed abroad. The result was an aircraft whose components arrived from overseas, with final assembly taking place locally. Still, the 95-seat regional jet was presented as the first step toward reviving the Russian civil aircraft industry. To succeed, the SSJ-100 had to conquer not only the Russian market, but also win sales abroad. From the very beginning, the project was framed as an international effort. To push the aircraft onto the global market, Russia had little choice but to make it international from the start. About a third of the jet's systems, including its avionics, were French. Italian, American, and German companies also contributed. On paper, the Sukhoi Superjet 100 had the numbers to compete with market leaders like Bombardier and Embraer. It was a fully digital aircraft controlled entirely by fly-by-wire systems, just like the most advanced Airbus models. And most importantly, it promised to be 10% more fuel efficient and 15% cheaper than its rivals. With aggressive discounts, the Superjet could undercut competitors by an even wider margin. Executives at Interjet, the Mexican airline that became the largest foreign operator of the SSJ-100, often remarked that 10 Superjets cost them about the same as a single Airbus. For Interjet, this was a money-making machine. Similar enthusiasm came from Ireland's CityJet, another early customer. Yet in practice, operators soon encountered the same set of problems. Yes, the Superjet delivered fuel savings, but it fell short in another critical economic measure, utilization. Aeroflot, the main operator, reported that its Superjets averaged just 3.3 flight hours per day. By contrast, even aging Embraers in Russia routinely managed 5 to 6 hours. The reason was straightforward: lengthy repair times caused by chronic shortages of spare parts. Crews complained the aircraft was falling apart in flight, teething problems with both the airframe and the cabin. Some aircraft had to be grounded while issues were fixed. The most notorious problems included jammed leading-edge slats, malfunctions with the nose gear retraction system, and cracks in the stabilizer fittings. Early cabin models suffered from faulty air conditioning and poor interior assembly. Over time, many cabin issues were corrected, but the reputation damage lingered. Then came tragedy. On May 9, 2012, during a demonstration flight in Indonesia, Superjet 97004 slammed into the vertical slope of Mount Salak while flying at 6,000 feet. All 45 people on board, 3 crew and 42 passengers, were killed, including Russian crew and foreign passengers from France, the US, and Indonesia. Despite setbacks, Russia managed to sell the aircraft here and there. Deliveries trickled out. Each sale was promoted as a showcase of Putin's Russia, and the aircraft became a regular prop during presidential visits and international appearances. Yes, the Sukhoi Superjet 100 was built, and yes, it flew. That alone was no small feat. But Pogosyan's real challenge was selling it abroad and keeping it flying. Initial orders came from several foreign airlines, but most later abandoned the type, returning their aircraft to lessors. For many observers, it seemed there was always a personal or political interest behind Putin's visible support for the program. After all, Sukhoi Civil Aircraft was not a private company. This was a state-driven enterprise. Aircraft were pushed onto airlines, sometimes against their will. Aeroflot, for example, was pressured to take on the Superjet despite its immaturity, and then came the disasters. The most infamous was the 2019 Sheremetyevo tragedy. But the list of incidents was long. May 9, 2012. Demonstration flight in Indonesia crashes into Mount Salak. May 5, 2015. During takeoff from Sheremetyevo, a Superjet loses part of its engine nozzle assembly. The failure is discovered only after landing at the destination. June 2018. An SSJ-100 makes an emergency landing in Barnaul after a suspected false fire alarm. Just a month earlier, another had to land at Sheremetyevo due to a cracked windshield. May 5, 2019, Sheremetyevo disaster. A Superjet struck by lightning suffers autopilot failure. The crew switches to direct mode. A little-used manual control law. Their handling proves poor. On a botched landing, the aircraft bounces, slams down, and bursts into flames. 41 passengers die. They couldn't land it manually. They struck the aircraft against the runway. And yet, the aircraft itself was never officially blamed. Investigations pointed to pilots, weather, or maintenance. Meanwhile, crews and passengers continued to fly, often aware they were taking a risk. The unresolved technical flaws left a shadow over the SSJ's image. So, in a sense, the airplane still doesn't really exist. I would even say it hasn't properly completed its test program, yet it is being operated every single day. Well, okay, Russia did get its own regional jet in 2008. But if something appears somewhere, then by the law of conservation of matter, something must disappear elsewhere, right? A small digression. There once was a famous company called Dornier. It was founded by Claudius Dornier in 1914. He was French by nationality, born in Germany, spent half his life in Switzerland, and became well known in the period between the First and Second World Wars as a manufacturer of all-metal flying boats and land-based airliners. During the World War II, he developed the Dornier 17 bomber, a modification of a transport aircraft originally intended for Lufthansa. But Lufthansa had rejected the aircraft because of its narrow, cramped fuselage, but later Dornier reintroduced it as a bomber. He was also known for the Dornier 335 fighter. After the Second World War, Dornier moved to Switzerland, where the company provided consulting services in the field of aviation until it returned to Germany in 1954. In 1974, it joined a joint venture with the French aircraft manufacturer Dassault Breguet to develop the Alpha jet. In 1983, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited acquired a license to produce the Dornier 228 for the Asian market. By 2013, the company had produced a total of 117 Dornier 228 aircraft, and another 20 were planned for 2013 to 2014. In 1985, Dornier became part of the Daimler-Benz Group, merging its aviation assets with those of its parent company. As part of this deal, Lindauer Dornier GmbH was established. In 1996, most of Dornier aircraft was acquired by Fairchild Aircraft, forming Fairchild Dornier. Fairchild, of course, is the same company that produces the A-10 attack aircraft. However, Fairchild became insolvent in early 2002. Production of the Dornier 328 jet was then acquired by the American company Avcraft. Asian groups continued to show interest in the Dornier 728 model as late as August 2004, but its production was never resumed. Production of the Dornier 228 was transferred to a Swiss manufacturer, which later sold it to General Atomics in 2020. Other subsidiaries became part of EADS. As a result, the only Dornier 728 ever built now lies in pieces in a German museum. The 728 model turned out to be fatal for Dornier as a company. Let's return to the Dornier 328. This was a high-wing aircraft with 2 turboprop engines, seating 30 passengers. The 328 marked a new chapter for Dornier in the development of their airliners, especially compared to the 228. When Fairchild bought Dornier, they converted the 328 into the 328J. The turboprop was redesigned into a jet-powered aircraft. The Fairchild Dornier 328J became a regional jetliner for short and medium-haul routes. It was developed from the turboprop Dornier 328, designed and launched into early serial production by the German company Dornier Luftfahrt GmbH. In 1996, the company was acquired by the American Fairchild Aircraft, forming Fairchild Dornier. The first flight took place on January 20th, 1999. In total, 105 aircraft were produced. Serial production ceased due to the company's bankruptcy. As of August 2010, 54 of these aircraft remained in service. The main operators included Ultimate Jet Charter in Ohio, USA, 10 aircraft, Tianjin Airlines, 29 aircraft, and Sun Air of Scandinavia, 6 aircraft. In 1998, they launched the next aircraft, the Fairchild Dornier 428 jet, a 42 to 44 seat stretched version of the 30-seat 328 jet. Its entry into service was expected within a few months. During development alongside the 428, the stretched version of the 328, they also announced the launch of a whole new family of aircraft, the 528, 728, and 928, seating 50, 70, and over 90 passengers respectively. This was an entire series of aircraft, based on a different design concept. This time it was a low-wing aircraft, again with 2 jet engines. This marked another milestone for the company. Dornier was finally producing a modern airliner in what had become the most popular configuration of the era. And indeed, this design turned out to be the most economically and commercially successful layout, sold in large numbers worldwide. Airlines everywhere replaced older models of other layouts with these truly modern airplanes, a low-wing aircraft with 2 turbofan engines. The Dornier 528J was a short-haul turbofan passenger aircraft for regional routes. In an attempt to enter this market, Dornier announced in 1996 its plans to develop 2 modifications derived from the Dornier 328. The first was the 328J, essentially the original 30-seat Dornier 328 in jet form. The second was the 528J, a stretched version seating 50 passengers. Fairchild Dornier estimated that by 2015, around 300 units of the 528J could be delivered. The aircraft was first announced on May 19, 1998 at the ILA Air Show in Berlin. It was the smallest model in the new jet family. Series production was scheduled for 2004. This was a relatively ambitious plan to develop a family of aircraft seating between 50 and 110 passengers, complementing the existing 328 jet, the smaller regional jet. The 728 to 928 family was designed as a low-wing monoplane with fixed wings and 2 engines mounted under the wings. On May 21, 2002, the first 728 prototype was rolled out. The company planned its first flight for summer 2002 and the start of deliveries in mid-2003 to the launch customer, Lufthansa CityLine. The 728 family featured a modern design and attracted significant interest from various airlines after the program launch. By March 2002, a total of 8 customers had placed 125 firm orders, along with options for another 164 aircraft. However, at a later stage, the program collapsed due to the insolvency of Fairchild Dornier, which occurred soon after the official rollout of the first 728s. Despite attempts to revive the program, including the creation of Fairchild Dornier Aero Industries, customers ultimately canceled all their orders. In reality, not a single aircraft ever flew. 3 completed prototypes were sold off for other purposes. Now let's look in more detail. The rise and fall of the Dornier 728. In the mid-1990s, the German aircraft manufacturer Dornier Luftfahrt GmbH was experiencing significant financial difficulties. This largely led to its acquisition by the American aerospace company Fairchild Aircraft, after which the organization was renamed Fairchild Dornier. Soon after, the company began restructuring and reviewing its product lineup. The first aircraft to appear under Fairchild Dornier was the 328 jet, a relatively straightforward jet-powered adaptation of the Dornier 328 turboprop. But even before its first flight, the company had bigger ambitions to build a series of larger regional jetliners. In October 1997, Fairchild Dornier announced the 728 program, initially known as the X-28 jet project and later publicly renamed the 728 jet at the Dubai Air Show. The new family of regional aircraft, the 528 jet, 728 jet, and 928 jet, seating between 50 and 100 passengers, was officially presented at the Berlin Air Show. On May 19, 1998, Fairchild Dornier announced it had already secured preliminary orders, including from Lufthansa, Germany's flag carrier, which placed 60 firm and 60 optional orders, as well as from the Swiss airline Crossair. The total investment in the program sourced from Fairchild Dornier's own funds and its risk-sharing partners amounted to $850 million. According to company president Jim Robinson, suppliers of the wing, fuselage, and tail assembly alone contributed $220 million, while additional efforts were being made to secure further support from suppliers and the German federal government. One option under consideration was to take the company public. Various partnership structures were also studied. At one stage, Dornier held talks with Alenia, part of the Italian ATR consortium, about possible cooperation on the 728. At program launch, it was expected that the first production aircraft would be delivered in mid-2001, with type certification in the same year. Dornier also invested heavily in computer modeling of manufacturing and assembly processes, which was expected to yield significant labor cost savings. Reports suggested that thanks to these efforts, man-hours required for the 728 were reduced by 60%. For the same reason, advanced production equipment was also procured. By mid-2001, Dornier began building the first prototype. Most of the structural components were delivered by September 2001. In December 2001, Fairchild Dornier reportedly completed the first fuselage. In March 2002, the official rollout of the first prototype, Test Aircraft 01, took place, after which it was presented to the public. In June 2001, it was reported that the leasing company GE Capital Aviation Services had placed a firm order for 50 aircraft, along with additional options for up to 100 more. By March 2002, a total of 8 customers, including Lufthansa CityLine, GE Capital Aviation Services, Bavaria Leasing, CSA Czech Airlines, Atlantic Coast Airlines, and Solaire, had reportedly placed a combined 125 firm orders for the type. Options were also signed for an additional 164 aircraft. For the program to break even, 200 aircraft needed to be sold. The centerpiece of the program was the 70 to 85 seat 728, previously known as the 728 jet. It was supposed to make its first flight in the summer of 2002. Deliveries were also expected to begin in mid-2003, with Lufthansa CityLine as the launch customer. However, just 2 days before the rollout, it was announced that the program would be delayed by 2 months due to a shortage of available funds. A week later, reports emerged that the company was in negotiations with 4 potential new strategic partners, and that securing at least one of them was of critical importance. But before the scheduled date of the first flight, the Dornier 728 program was declared insolvent, and on April 2, 2002, Dornier was forced to file for bankruptcy. One consequence of this was the immediate halt of the entire program. Shortly afterward, Lufthansa CityLine and GE Capital Aviation Services decided to cancel their orders for the type. The withdrawal of the 728's 2 largest customers dealt a severe blow to the program and likely discouraged potential investors and partners the company had been seeking at the time. In July 2003, the Dilong International Strategic and Investment Group from Xinjiang, China, expressed interest in acquiring a stake in the project. A new venture, Fairchild Dornier Aero Industries, was established to complete the aircraft's development. However, this company also declared bankruptcy in 2004. And so you understand why I showed you the Dornier 728, which effectively died in 2004. Well, in 2008, it resurfaced in Russia under the name Sukhoi Superjet. On the internet, you can find claims that the Sukhoi Superjet 100 bears a strong visual resemblance to the German regional aircraft Fairchild Dornier 728, whose project was halted after Fairchild Dornier went bankrupt in 2004. The SSJ's developers denied any link between their project and the Dornier 728. Do you want evidence? Well, here it is. The suppliers of Dornier 728, and as you can see, the SSJ 100 has the same list of suppliers. Here's another feature shared by both the Superjet and Dornier, the absence of overwing emergency exits, additional evacuation points. This is most likely why 41 people died in that Sheremetyevo accident. They simply didn't have enough emergency exits. I have no idea for how much the Pogosian group acquired the project, but it seems to me they simply burned through funds for 4 years. What's certain is that this project was not sold before 2004. And let me remind you, that's just state funding of $3.3 billion, not counting additional attracted funds. But here we can calculate how much Fairchild Dornier spent on developing this aircraft up to production readiness. The total program investment, funded from Fairchild Dornier's own resources and its risk-sharing partners, amounted to $850 million, plus an additional $880 million. So to bring the Dornier 728 to ready for production stage, they spent $1.63 billion. That's almost half of what the Russian government allocated for the development of essentially the same aircraft in Russia. I think no further comment is necessary here. I am not against Russia producing new modern aircraft, but when I look at the Dornier, I see an aircraft built with care and of course by professionals, and it cost only $1.63 billion. Meanwhile, in Russia, they spent $3.3 billion of state funds just to acquire someone else's project, plus, I guess, untold billions more. And reported by the government press service on February 28, 2011, Venetia-Bank was to decide on December 29th the issue of granting a $1 billion loan for the Sukhoi Superjet 100 project. The supervisory board of Venetia-Bank, chaired by Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, was set to consider on the proposal to provide a $1 billion loan to Sukhoi Civil Aircraft Company for the Superjet 100 program. Then, on December 30th, 2011, Sukhoi Civil Aircraft received $1 billion. On May 21, 2015, the Supervisory Board of Venetia-Bank, at a Thursday meeting, approved the granting of a loan worth 32.5 billion rubles to Sukhoi Civil Aircraft Company, the manufacturer of the Sukhoi Superjet. This was announced by VEB Chairman Vladimir Dmitriev. Fairchild Dornier planned serial production of the aircraft for 2004 with an estimated price of $18 million. By 2007, the Superjet cost around $27 million. Well, $27 million versus $18 million for German quality. $27 million for Superjet is 10% below the market leader, Embraer. But Embraer was recognized as the best regional jet in the world. On the other hand, the Superjet did not even meet ordinary quality standards. By 2011, the catalog price of the Sukhoi Superjet 100 was already nearly $31 million. And at the beginning of 2012, the cost rose to $35.4 million per aircraft. However, SCAC insisted it was still 15% cheaper than comparable models. Even with all this, the project could have been refined. Although, as you can see, the aircraft had problems. Many pointed out that the Superjet was unsuitable for Russian operating conditions. And, as many pilots noted, it was foolish to design an aircraft for Russian conditions when it didn't actually fit them. In Russia, where runways often fail to meet international standards, placing engines so low where even stones from the surface could be sucked into the intakes was simply impractical. Moreover, Dornier had previously built only high-wing aircraft. The 728 was their first low-wing design. It is possible they had not fully calculated or understood the operational challenges of low-wing aircraft with engines mounted beneath the wings on pylons. Also, conditions in Germany are very different from Russia. And finally, let's take a look at the chief designer. His name is Yuri Viktorovich Ivashechkin. But who is this Ivashechkin? The fact is, Yuri Ivashechkin was the first chief designer of the Superjet. He was even older than Pogosyan himself, born in 1933. He had designed the T-4 parachute. Since January 1961, he worked at the Sukhoi Design Bureau. From 1980, he was chief designer. He participated in the development of the Su-15 and Su-9, also the Su-24 and Su-25. From November 1985, he worked at the Mikoyan Design Bureau and later became the first chief designer of the Superjet. But to be honest, I kinda don't believe that. Moreover, this man had absolutely no experience working with passenger aircraft. He was the one who designed the legendary Su-25 attack aircraft, but he would never have been able to design even a door for an airliner. And that's the whole story.
Well, that Sukhoi is indeed Dornier. I think I've proven that. But now it's time to hear your opinion. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep the conversation flying. Thank you for watching till the end, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and join our growing community. A warm welcome to all new viewers and subscribers. It's great to have you on board. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and blue skies everyone.